Hi, I'm Bob Trask. For the last 50 years or 45 years, I've been working around the world with thousands of people teaching consciousness and how to live lives of excellence, the lives we came here to live. I'm recovering from a shoulder operation, and I have my dear friend and little brother, Roger Teel, who also has an international ministry, thousands of followers. I just honor this guy so deeply, and he has this magnificent book, Life is Joy, which is absolutely true. Because if we can't find that life is in fact joy, then we're missing out. He's an amazing guy. He was at once my student. Now he's my teacher. He's going to take us today through our reset. And I just say thank you so much for being here. Please help me welcome Roger Teel. Roger Teel,
There we go. There we go. Thank you, Bob. I think I'm on now, right?
yes,
All right. I love you,
yes, you
Bob. I
are.
love you, Mary. You're both looking great. I'm glad that the healing continues in a wonderful way. And boy, I would ditto everything Bob said, but put it right back at him. He's been a tremendous teacher of mine, as I shared last week. I love him dearly, and I always get something from every conversation I have with him. And then Mary, she's a rascal, and she's so powerful. If you want something done, have Mary Trask in charge. In fact, I think I'm going to make her my assistant at a distance because I can barely keep on top of all of the administrative stuff of the little personal ministry I've had going. And I need somebody like that. So, Mary, wait for a phone call or don't accept my calls if you get one coming in. But I love them both. And I'm so very honored to be in your midst because obviously, like attracts like and you all uh, have resonated with Bob, and thus the seeds of what Bob is about and who he is are you as well. So, gosh, what a great joy to be in your midst and to help out somebody, Bob. It's just very joyous. All right. Well, I thought today I'd talk about the call to soar free, the call to soar free. And I was remembering this week that back in the 80s, a couple of buddies and I drove up from Denver to an area near Boulder because out of that little airport, they were offering people flights in glider planes. And we thought, wow, well, let's go do that. And so we all drove up there and signed up. And the glider planes had I was in front, and thank God there was a pilot who knew what they were doing behind me, and they were attached by this line, this very thick line, and so the little one engine uh, plane starts taking off and pulling our engineless glider plane on this tow line, and we go up and up and up, and then we're circling around and gaining more altitude, and we're looking down on the beautiful Boulder Valley. It was so exquisite. It was a wonderful thing, and you could hear the rush of the air going across the plane, and I was just having a great time. And then all of a sudden, the guy behind me in the seat behind me said, "Time to pull the release lever." I have to tell you, quite honestly, I had a few second thoughts about that. I thought, why don't we just? I'm complete. I'm good with this as it is right now. But nonetheless, he urged me, and I pulled this metal lever and separated from the tow line from that outer assistance. I've always remembered that that's kind of a powerful metaphor that can lead us to realize uh, moments of greater liberation and transformation. And I believe that something like that happening in our life is truly a key to personal evolution, or it has been on my journey, because life supports us. It supports the fulfillment of its creation at every level. And yet, in providing that support, it also invites us to those moments when we soar free. Now, it's essential that that tow plane pulls us up to altitude so that the intended purpose can be fulfilled. Because They take pilots up there, pilots in training, and just people who want an experience like we did. But they take them up so that they can learn the dynamics of flight, so that they can experience and feel the nuances and the updrafts and the downdrafts and using the air currents. And none of that is possible without the tow line having first taken us there. And I learned it's equally essential to release from the tow plane when the time is right. And by the way, a good glider pilot can stay aloft all day if they choose. It's an amazing experience. And then I reflected on our birth. We're all delivered into this world from the womb of our mothers. And soon after birth, the cord must be cut, or we won't live and we won't learn to operate in this world. Now, I was thinking if we could in the womb think and consider and choose, we might say, hey, you know what? Life is just fine here. Life is just fine. I get food regularly, even without DoorDash, you know, and it's comfy here. Temperature is ideal and totally controlled. I have no challenges. Hey, I'm staying tethered to mom. But the problem is that a greater dimension of life awaits us. There comes a time in our life when almost all of the support systems are primed to be released, that we might reveal and activate more of the capacities and the personal spiritual powers within us to live more fully. And such support that guides us in our life, support is there for a reason and a season, but seldom is it there forever. And so there comes a time when we're called to release certain security lines and to know when a blessing has become a limitation for our journey, for our onward, upward journey. You know, this country of ours began as a ceded colony of Great Britain. But because of controlling and repressive policies, there was a growing realization that the relationship had become obsolete and counterproductive. And so the colonists pulled the release lever and they birthed a greater experiment in democracy, an experiment on pluralism, of inclusion, the inclusion of all people, of liberty and justice for all. And we're still trying to get that gain right. And there's still a lot of challenges in fulfilling that promise. And yet we had to pull the release lever. So there are key moments on this exquisite journey of ours where the guiding intelligence within us issues the call to soar free, to soar free. It's a dream of the universe for us. Spirit says, find what elevates you, find it, use it well, then pull the release lever. Now, last week I told you that I have an affinity, some would say an addiction, to acronyms. And so I got one for you. That word soar is such a wonderful word. I see it like this. It's about seize the opportunity and release. Soar, seize the opportunity, seize opportunity and release, that we might learn to sense the dynamics of flight in this life, to learn to soar free through our lessons of greater personal mastery, always trusting that at the critical points in our life, the universe supplies us with resources and support. But the tendency so often is to become dependent on the tow plane, afraid of soaring free without that perceived supply and support. And we cling fearfully to those channels of support. Ram Dass once said, when we cling to what changes, we suffer. And so a lot of our discomfort in life is that clinging beyond any benefit that has been accrued. So here's the question I ask myself, and I invite you to consider this day. Where in my life am I clinging? Where am I resisting some life enhancing change? Where am I delaying my breakthroughs into greater mastery, into more of who I am designed and destined to be? It's a powerful group of questions for us. A bold embracing of change is really a powerful way to live. I'm not sure it's a very easy way to live, but I think it's in tune with the infinite. There's this changeless reality. You could call it the spirit, universal intelligence, God, love, whatever you're comfortable with. So I ran across a guy who called it the quantum field. It doesn't really matter what we call it, but there's this changeless reality, but it births manifestation and realms of experience that have within them constant change. So there's constant change. Ernest Holmes said, we cannot live a changeless life. We cannot. And yet he also taught, and the other great New Thought founders have taught, that we live in a changeless reality. And so it helps us to remember that we're experiencing change constantly in this earthly walk, this world we're a part of. And we're also rooted in something that is changeless and always provides when we need it, but invites us to understand that it's awakening something that's already within us. I had the privilege of having as an associate minister at Mile High Church a wonderful, wonderful lady, and I bet Bob and Mary remember Dr. Marjorie Stamm. Oh, Marjorie was a wonderful, wonderful lady. And I coaxed her to leave a small ministry she had in the the Albuquerque area and come join our team at Mile High. And she was somewhat advanced in years, but she worked at Mile High for a good 20 years. And then and she was indispensable. She was like Mary. She was making everything happen, and always behind the scenes supporting, and always had this cackle of a laugh that was a delight to us all. But she, in the last several years, she would come to me and say, it's getting close to me in being needing to leave here. And I just loved her so deeply and depended on her. I couldn't let it happen. I said, Marge, forget that. Forget that. And I kept doing that year after year. Early in a year, she'd come and say, I got to leave. But then I started noticing something. She was the keeper of notebooks. She had a notebook, thorough details on every program, ministry, activity in that church. You walk into her office and there were bookshelves all over the place with notebooks. I started noticing her giving these away to certain staff people and certain key volunteers, and that kind of concerned me, but I thought, well, it's good for other people to know. And then she again, in her last year there, said, this is probably my year and you're going to need this office here. And I said, I don't want this office. This is your office. You stay right here. A few months later, she walked into my office and put her keys on my desk. And she said, you'll notice in my office, I've moved everything out. A few things remain there, but I've given them away. I said, Marge, you don't want to do this. You're doing great. She said, it's time. She turned around and left. She got in her big old Buick, a huge boat of a car, and drove over to a car dealer, sold her car to them on the caveat that they would provide her a driver to take her home. She stopped by and said goodbye to a dear friend who ran a cleaners. They loved each other. They cried a little. She said, this is the last time I'll see you. Then she got in that car with the driver. He drove her to a beautiful retirement community called Windcrest, fabulous place. She got out there and started her new life in one day. In one day. Now that's pulling the release lever right there. I wasn't happy at all. And she allowed us to hold some minister meetings in her small apartment there and for a while. And then she just kept progressively embracing the change. And finally, at one point, Erica and I would take her lunch and enjoy lunch with her. And I said to her on a call one day, Marge, it's time for Erica and me to come over with lunch. She said, oh, honey, I've been meaning to tell you, I'm not receiving visitors anymore. And that hit me in the gut. I was shattered. I said, Marge, but it's me. And she said, honey, I love you, always love you. You can call. And so we grieved about that. And I would keep calling her. And then at one point, she told me, this will be our last conversation, our last call. And I'm not sure exactly when, but it was 3 or 4 months after that that she took the great journey that we'll all take at some point. I've always remembered how Marge didn't fight the flow of life, and she flowed with it, um, pulling the release lever so many times. Um, and I didn't like any of them. But then again, I think that's what we do. We love things and we don't want anything to ever change and anyone to ever change. But we're in a dimension of continual change, not to taunt us, not to rip us apart, but to evolve us always. And Marge was a big yes. Was it easy for her to do all of that? No, I'm sure it wasn't. She was a person of great love and great feeling. And yet she knew how to flow with things. And that teaches me a lot. So there's some areas I thought I might just speak a little bit to, where it really is important to seize opportunity and release. The first is in our roles. And I'm not talking about my waistline where I've got a different kind of challenge, but I'm talking about our roles that we play in life. They're very often vital and empowering, but they also have a shelf life. And the time comes when they must evolve or transform. I think one of them is in parenting. Um, it's essential to let that role evolve, to release the roles we played early on in parenting, let it morph. And, parents who cling and control and neediness actually see the relationship begin to erode or somehow impair the evolution of the child. And, allowing a child to be dependent and not leave the nest um, is a disservice to the ongoing maturation of that child. I'm a fan of Khalil Gibran, who wrote the classic, the Lebanese poet who wrote the classic uh, work, The Prophet. I love what he says about children. He said, your children are not your children. They're the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You are the bows from which your children, as living arrows, are sent forth. Really powerful one. There are other roles that we play, and we have to ask, am I allowing it to progressively evolve? In 2017, I began to uh, get unsettling guidance in my quiet times. Everything at Mile High Church was going phenomenally. In 2008, we'd opened a new 1,500 seat sanctuary that was tremendous. And all the programs continued to grow and evolve, even through, we did okay through the 2008 financial crash recession in our country. Um, and we're on this continued growth curve, everything fine. But in 2017, it was coming to me that, okay, this is finished. It's not finished, but you are. You need to embrace change. And I realized I had been in the formal ministry for over 4 decades. And I think that higher self that knows we're of an ever evolving, upward spiraling spirit was saying to me, you know, you've done this, done it passably well, and yet there's more on your agenda as a being beyond your role that you would be wise to embrace. And that just became so insistent that finally, in 2018, Erica and I went here to actually to a resort in Phoenix, and we held up for a week, and I just agreed with the universe, and I started plotting out a year-long transition of progressive retirement at Mile High, and went ahead and announced it, and to first the ministers, then the practitioners, then key donors, and just progressively more and more, and got a lot of pushback. A lot of people saying you're too young. Yeah, I don't know how old was I? I don't know, 67 or 8, around in there. They say you're too young. You got 10, 20 years left. And from appearances, maybe that could be thought of as true. And yet we all have a soul path and agenda that is bigger than that. And it was beginning to be clear to me that there were areas I could grow and evolve that probably wouldn't be addressed if I stayed in that all-consuming role. And even though I'd done it for a whole long time, I had to admit that it was wearing on me. I was less tolerant of board meetings, and Bob understands all that. And I just realized this has played itself out. And so that's one area where there are times we seize the opportunity, and then there comes the time to release. And so I did in 2019. On March 4th, Sunday, March 4th, I marched forth into a new change in my life. And the first year wasn't easy, but then I began to realize I can still minister. I'm ordained for life, but I can do it in a way that doesn't interfere with the discovery and the joys that life still held for me. Maybe there's a role or so in your life that might call you in such a way. And then sometimes we have to give up and pull the release lever on certain routes that we have plotted, pathways that we're on, but ones we've embraced. And sometimes we stay on those routes, which are like shoulds. You should always do or be this. But releasing can invite a whole lot of growth. In my book, I write about a wonderful man who was a board president of mine, one of the ones I just cherished, and a dear friend. His name was Bob. And Bob came from a family, his dad and his dad's dad, and before that, were all in the armed services, and were high-ranking officers. And Bob felt that was his calling. He was going to be in the army, but he had some physical challenges. He had some problems with his feet and his eyes and certain things, and he was underweight and gangly. But he leaned into it in his teen years, learning to pick up marbles with his toes and doing eye exercises and drinking pints of cream and working out rigorously. And he overcame. He had a heart murmur that he overcame, and he was able to get into West Point. And he graduated with honors as an officer. After a stint of setting up and he went into the Army Ranger training and and became a ranger. And he was commissioned, first of all, in Vietnam to set up certain relief activities. It was after the conflict there. And then he was shipped from Vietnam over to Hawaii for a short stint. And he told me that one day he and his buddies decided to go see the movie The Longest Day, which is about the D-Day invasion in World War II. And Bob said they got to the ticket office and bought tickets, but then all of a sudden something came over him. This huge energy came over him. And he realized, I don't want to go see that. And so he told his buddies, you go see that. I'll meet you when you're done. And he said that he sat out on the curb and had this epiphany. All of a sudden, he yielded to something within him that said, I don't want this path. I don't want to be an officer. I don't want to be in the armed forces. I want to work for energies of peace. He said that day he couldn't escape it. And shortly thereafter, he resigned his commission, much to the chagrin of his family and other people around him. And he embarked into the unknown. He didn't know what was going to happen. He grieved it for a while, just as I grieved leaving the ministry when I did. I think whenever change happens, sometimes we grieve it, and that's necessary. It's a part of the process. Eventually, in his wandering, he was very well educated. He got a job with IBM, and it's there that he learned a lot of his leadership skills. He became a tremendous leadership consultant after he left IBM. And on the very day he was hired, another lady was hired, and she got to know him, and she introduced him to metaphysics and to the Seth material, and later the Course in Miracles. And as he continued this journey, he had then found New Thought and Mile High Church, and became a great member and board member and leader in the church. And all of this because he realized a route that he had selected, while letting him become strong and teaching him a lot, wasn't his path. And he pulled the release lever and he went forward. I've always respected Bob a lot for that. He's a great teacher. So yeah, there's roles we sometimes either need to evolve or release, routes as well. Sometimes relationships. Sometimes we realize that certain relationships are for a lifetime, and some are for a season or for a lesson. That can happen in business and professional relationships, sometimes partnerships, marriages, other personal relationships. It's best to flow with the energies. Even our friendships can change. When Erica and I moved here and started this new chapter here in Arizona, we clearly decided that we wanted to draw closer to certain people that we hadn't been as connected with, that we cherish, Bob and Mary among them. And then there were others that really we didn't think were a part of this chapter, and that we were open to new friendships, which we've really experienced a lot of here. Emerson has written that we can see our growth in the successive choirs of our friends. And so as we grow, so do our friendships grow. And some of them can go with us. I think there's some friendships like ours with Bob and Mary and a few others in our life that we'll have all our life, no matter what the changes are. And yet some of them run their course. And that doesn't mean they were bad or we're bad. It's just that life evolves. Everything evolves. So yeah, our roles, our routes, our relationships. And one other that I want to talk about are ruts. So very often we get in ruts and we just think that this is the way it has to be. This is, or I've heard people say, and I've said it, it's just the way I am. And I know there are certain quirks. I'm filled with quirks, as Erica would tell you, and idiosyncrasies. And hopefully I'm not identifying as them, and I'm open to something more about me. But we can all get in ruts, and they can be stifling. I think that we tend to stay in them to avoid vulnerability. And yet I believe life is always calling us to positive risks in our lives, to that time when it's appropriate to pull that release lever and open to some greater dream or potential in our hearts. I want to close with a beautiful story that has touched my heart, about a young woman named Susanna Crowder. She was in a rut. She was 28 years old. She was homeless, living in Columbus, Ohio. Her background was that her mother was an alcoholic. She experienced sexual abuse and being told 1,000 times that she was worthless. She remembers having her first birthday party, the first birthday party in her life, next to a burning trash can, with several homeless friends who'd scraped together some food stamps to get her a little cake. And they gave her $5 as a present to get a meal, because at that time she was also 7 months pregnant. So she left that, her very first birthday party, and she went back to her squat at the back door of a church to get some sleep. She said then that she was awakened by the cold, and she then decided to go dumpster diving to try to get some food to feed herself and that little life in her tummy. And in recounting her life, she wrote that she at the time said to herself, I feel sorry for this child I'm about to have, because he got stuck with me as his mother. I've been thinking about finding a family to raise him so he's not homeless with me. This thought is so painful that I try to put it out of my head. However, I'm his mother. It's up to me to figure out what is best for him and do it. Giving him to a nice family and maybe doing myself in. That seems the best for everyone. Well, later that day, Susanna went to a public library to get warm. She ends up in the inspiration section of that library and grabbed the first book she sees. And it's a copy of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And she opens it in the middle of it to a story called Puppies for Sale. It's a story about a boy who goes into a pet store with a couple of dollars and he looks at a litter of puppies and he sees one that is lame and smaller than the others. And he tells the shopkeeper he wants that one. But the shopkeeper keeps telling him, no, 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 you don't want that one. But the boy insists. And finally, the shopkeeper gives him the runt for free, since the dog's worthless because of its lame leg. And the little boy gets angry and tells the store owner that the puppy is worth every bit as much as the others. And the boy then reaches down and pulls up his pant leg, exposing a mangled leg surrounded by a metal brace. And he declares the puppy will need someone who understands. And as Susanna read that story, it was a transformational moment. She writes, my chest feels heavy and my breathing is quick. Maybe I'm valuable too, is the thought that circles my head and heart, enveloping me in comfort. I'm suddenly at peace with myself. I'm no longer alone. I'm not sure who is with me, but I'm surrounded by compassion. I'm valuable too. I'm not damaged goods. With help, I can have a life. She went from that moment into 5 years of psychotherapy, a lot of spiritual work, building up her self-esteem. Her life became totally remade. Her son, Matt, played sports, did great in school, and today she's an author and a teacher, CEO of Chicken Soup Kitchens, an organization that's dedicated to feeding the homeless. And she concluded her sharing that one little story at the library initiated change and love inside of me. It launched a miracle. She pulled the release lever from a rut of thinking, her conclusions about herself, and she soared into love. So I don't always know what happens when we pull the release lever in our roles or paths we've chosen, our routes, our relationships, the ruts we may have gotten into. But here's what I do know, that when we pull that release lever, the currents of life support us. Love supports us. And we do allow ourselves to move into ever greater growth and good. And I hope that blesses you. It's been fun to share with you.
Thank you, Roger. This is Roger Teel, who is one of the greatest spiritual masters in my life and a man that I deeply, deeply admire. Thank you. Next week, I'll be back with you. Thank you so much, Roger.